This month's Twin Peaks Conversations guest is Scott Ryan, author of the upcoming book Fire Walk with Me, Your Laura's Disappeared. Although its official release is scheduled for May 2022, the 30th anniversary of the film's premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, we're going to be discussing it now because he's printing some copies in full color, and the window for pre-orders to get that version for the same price as the black and white editions, it's only going to last for another week or two. So make sure to order that soon if you want that color edition. And I was able to read part of the book before we spoke, and I was deeply impressed with its unusual combination of scope, insight, and personal narrative, which we're going to dig into in our conversation. Scott is also the author of many other books, including several oral histories on 80s TV staples like The Dave Letterman Show, albeit focusing on the final stretch of that show in 2015, but also 30-something and his just completed work on Moonlighting. Although this is his first book on Twin Peaks, he also publishes the Blue Rose fan magazine, and he's been behind the publication of many of the recent Twin Peaks books, like Conversations with Mark Frost, The Women of Twin Peaks, and Laura's Ghost, in addition to hosting the Red Room podcast and directing the documentary Voyage to Twin Peaks, about his first trip to the Twin Peaks Fan Festival. I published a print interview with him on that subject in 2016, and it's linked below. As always, part of this conversation will be public, and then as we dive deeper into the second part, I'm going to save the larger part of this podcast for $5 a month patrons on patreon.com/lostinthemovies. Running about an extra hour and a half, that passage will hone in on some of Scott's more mixed, perhaps even controversial opinions on Season 3, as well as the evolution of Lynch's aesthetic and his collaboration with Mary Sweeney, who Scott interviewed for this book. She's the editor of Fire Walk with Me. That's a part that I haven't read yet, and I'm more excited for it than anything else. We'll get into the reasons why. It's a fun conversation, keeps going for a much longer stretch. If you haven't become a patron yet, you get access not only to that, but all the previous month's conversations, bonus material. So you're getting more than half as a patron. Before the conversation begins, an update on my own work. Since pausing the Lost in Twin Peaks public podcast in November, my output has slowed down. As noted before the last upload, my written Mad Men viewing diary is continuing right into Season 7, so I'm currently covering the 1969 set episodes each Monday on lostinthemovies.com. I also published a couple new public podcast episodes, one on my Lost in the Movies feed, covering a double feature of The Devil Rides Out and Brawl in Cell Block 99, and the other on my Twin Peaks cinema feed, comparing Sunset Boulevard to Twin Peaks. That rounds out my What's in a Name series, in which I also discussed the film Laura and Vertigo, two films which, like Sunset Boulevard, lent character names and much, much more than that to the Lynch Frost show. Other than that, I've been finally cross-posting other patron podcasts, my earlier Twin Peaks conversations, and October and November main episodes on my site. I am hoping to finally wrap up the first season of Lost in Twin Peaks with a week of episodes on the finale starting Christmas Day, so keep your eyes out for that. May not be able to do it, but I got enough time ahead and enough of it's done that I think hopefully I can do that. So the last week of 2021 will be focusing on that Season 1 finale. But now, on to Scott Ryan and Fire Walk with Me. Welcome to Twin Peaks Conversations. This month's guest is Scott Ryan. You may have heard of him through the Red Room podcast, frequent guest appearances on Twin Peaks Unwrapped and others. Really a jack of all trades. I mean, not just in the podcasting world, but music, filmmaking. I'm going to let you introduce yourself from there, Scott. So tell us a little bit about yourself in case the listeners are unfamiliar, and what brings you here today, what particular work?
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm also a big fan of your work as well. I guess if you haven't heard of me, then I'm going to go sit and cry in a corner. So I hope you're happy. Listener, you made me cry. I love Twin Peaks. I've been a Twin Peaks fan since 1990. It changed my entire life. And I've just been chasing the pursuit of how this piece of art was created. It's something that sustains me even to this day. But with all that I've done, the Blue Rose magazine, Red Room podcast, documentaries, what have you, I've never written a book about Twin Peaks, which is crazy because I feel like so many people have, and I needed to have one. But I've been waiting to do this one, which is Fire Walk with Me, Your Laura Disappeared. and it's coming out in 2022. And I sort of threw the whole kitchen sink in this book, man. There's all kinds of stuff. I think it will be a surprise to someone. If you have an idea of what you think you're going to get, you're not going to get it. But I'm going to turn the tables as a podcast host myself and ask you that as the first question. What do you think? You got to read the first 7 chapters or something close to that. Is it what you expected, or is it not what you expected?
That's a good question. I mean, I am obviously familiar with your work. I've been following it for years. And I would say probably yes and no, and then yes again within the no. So to explain that, it's a complicated answer, but it's got a lot of different modes, the book, which I really enjoyed. So first off, just say, as you said, I read this first 7 chapters. I loved it. And I am both angry and excited that you only gave me the first 7 chapters, because I think the parts I'm anticipating most, which we'll definitely talk about, are some of the later ones, which I can't wait to read in the actual book. That includes an interview with Cheryl Lee and with Mary Sweeney, the editor, who I think people who followed my videos will definitely, they'll definitely be aware of how interested I am in her collaboration with Lynch and their work together. So I'm really anticipating that. But the parts I read were just a fascinating mixture of memoir, of sort of an analysis of the film, of reporting on different aspects, including some deep dives into not just a comparison between the script and the screen, but actually like early drafts of the screenplay. So there's so much going on in this book. I think I was expecting the memoir aspect, having seen your film, which we talked about a few years ago, Voyage into Twin Peaks, which is a documentary about the Twin Peaks Festival and your personal journey with Twin Peaks. I think I was surprised by the extent to which you also brought in so many other elements of the film. And that, as I said, there was sort of a, not surprise within the surprise. And that was once or vice versa, I guess. But basically, when I read the memoir part of your experience with Twin Peaks, with Fire Walk with Me specifically, the feeling of it is really palpable, if that makes sense. And that, I think, even knowing you were going to do something like that, the exact contours that it took couldn't have been predicted. I'll say that. You're somebody who has lived with this stuff for so long, but it always, the freshness of that initial experience, I think, really has stayed with you, and you're able to communicate it really well.
Oh, thank you. I really, really appreciate that. The thing about this book for me is that if I wrote it on a different day, it would be 100% different. And it was that way. I think I say somewhere in this book, although I don't think it was in the part that you got, that this is my 8th book now. And I have to come to the terms with that I did it. I'm an author now. I'm here, and this is my job. But it's always like magic to me. I don't know how it happens, but like when I sat down to write about the script, I started off with the story of how I got the script. And no one else would put that in a book about a movie. And I like how you called it a memoir, because when I first pitched this book to my business partner, David Bushman, he runs Fayetteville Mafia Press with me, I said, look, I'm going to do a book for the 30th anniversary of Fire Walk with Me, and I think I'm creating a new genre, and it's a memoir that's about a movie. And so I love that you use the word memoir, because in a way, that's kind of what it is. It's like my life story with Fire Walk with Me, because I've carried that movie so closely in my life.
Well, let me ask you, obviously, the readers are going to have to get the book to get the full story, but can you give them, or the listeners rather, but hopefully they'll become readers, can you give them a little bit of a sense of that story, where it began for you and why this film has stayed with you? Because again, to be clear, this is a book. Even though you're a huge Twin Peaks fan, you've written and talked about Twin Peaks as a whole, this is very much about Fire Walk with Me as a distinct entity both within that and outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, um, my story with Firewalk with Me is like burnt into my brain. I can remember the journey so real. Now, first of all, let me ask you, were you an original Twin Peaks watcher or did you catch it later?
No, I basically just missed it. I mean, I probably missed it by a lot because I was 7. It was, 7 to when you should watch Twin Peaks. There's a gap. But Brad Dukes, for example, is only a couple years older than me, and he did watch it live. So the fact that I really was just a little too young in 1990 meant I didn't see it for half of the show's lifetime at this point, till more than half, till 2008.
Okay.
So I
Well, I just
consider
wondered
myself
if
much more like a second or even third generation kind of Twin Peaks fan. So it's a whole different experience. I'm always fascinated with the people who were there at the inception, so to speak.
well, and it was important to me to sort of lay that groundwork because, you know, I mean, I certainly don't want to get political, but it's hard not to get political in this day and age. So, bear with me. But we just live in a time where history is constantly being rewritten. And in some ways, I feel like that's happened with Twin Peaks. And I wanted to stop and say, like, hey guys, this is how it really happened. This is what it was like for people like me and John Thorne, who did Wrapped in Plastic. And when John and I get on the phone, we immediately become two old men who talk about what it was like to be a Twin Peaks fan and just the loss, the devastation when it was canceled and how it was over. Where other people, you might watch episode 29 for the first time, but there's a Firewalk with Me, and these young punks today know there is a Twin Peaks return.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
So
huge, if there are dividing lines, I think generationally in the fandom, one of them is between the people who saw it originally and those who caught it later. And another one is between those who caught it later and the ones who came to it either right, after the return or during or like right before, to the point where they could just roll right into the return. It's a whole different sort of whole different sets of experience there.
yeah, and expectation and all that. So basically for me, I lost something in that June 1991. I remember the sadness of feeling that I was never going to see something like that again. And I guess really I never did, to be fair, because it never was the same. But so when Firewalk with Me came out, I couldn't have been more excited. I couldn't believe I was going to see more Twin Peaks. And I was in college and I went with a bunch of college friends on opening night. And every single person I went with hated it. I mean, hated it. Like, I remember standing outside of the theater when it was over. Everyone sort of like got in a circle, even with strangers I didn't know because, they were all Twin Peaks fans. And just everyone hated it. And I loved it. And I remember I lied. I didn't tell my girlfriend. And I went and saw it again during the week because I just knew it was something. And it was all Cheryl Lee for me. Like, I just loved what she did and that story. I was a big Audrey fan when the show was on. Like, I loved Sherilyn Fenn. She was my sweet baby, and she's my lifetime sweet baby. I just loved Sherilyn Fenn. I never really paid attention to Cheryl Lee in the series. But when I saw the movie, it just changed everything for me. And so it really takes about like 2 to 3 chapters for this book to get going, because I felt like I really wanted to set the world for everyone who just consumed Twin Peaks. If you binged it all in one time, I wanted to take you through what it was like for the series and all of those things.
Leading off of that point, when did you actually begin the work? I mean, it's been a lifetime in a way, but when did you really begin the work of this particular book? Because I'm guessing, for a while you've had it slated that, okay, it's going to come out for the 30th anniversary. You mentioned that you talked about with David Bushman think you said a couple years ago. What was like, was it just knowing that that anniversary was coming up, or was there some other sort of
Yeah,
process that
yeah. I
led
mean,
you
it
here?
really was. Well, I had always so Firewalk with Me is my favorite part. I don't think I could have written anything about the return, and I actually never have, which is kind of interesting.
Ooh,
Like
that is
I've
fascinating.
actually never, if anyone like looks through the Blue Rose, I've actually never put pen to paper about the return ever. I mean, I took copious notes when it was on, and I'm sure they're somewhere in the cloud. Um, but I've never written about the return. And the original series, I just feel like, what could you say about it that hasn't been said? I don't know. I think if I wrote a book about the original series, I would just make fun of it the whole time, but not in a mean way, just like how you make fun of your brother, you know, or your sister. Because I love telling Twin Peaks jokes. It's like my ultimate favorite thing to do. And nobody wants to read that because you're not supposed to ever make jokes about Twin Peaks or David Lynch's work. I've learned that the hard way at many Twin Peaks convention. So for me, Firewalk with Me is the only chance that for me to write a Twin Peaks book. And so I just kind of called it. I just told Bushman, you know, I knew I was working on my moonlighting book and that was taking a while. And so I just said, hey, I'm throwing this out there. I'm going to do it. And then moonlighting took me a lot longer, and I interviewed so many people for it. It was an oral history, and it was just so much work. And when I was done, I thought, I don't want to do that. I can't do what I normally do. I just
Hmm.
wanted to sit there and write. I didn't want to be beholden to someone else or trying to move things together. And so I think I started work on it last December is my guess. And
Okay. No, so not at the height of the pandemic. Interesting.
no, the pandemic, I worked on moonlighting. The
Gotcha.
whole
Okay.
pandemic was
And
moonlighting
this
for me.
for those listeners, maybe younger listeners and stuff unfamiliar. That's the show with Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, correct? From the 80s. Was it Sybil Shepherd?
Yes, Sybil
Okay.
Shepherd and Bruce Willis. It was on ABC. I always tell Brad Dukes that me and him need to tour because he did China Beach and Twin Peaks the series, and
Yeah.
I've done moonlighting and 30 something. And I'm like, we have covered ABC. We need to,
You got the
get
whole
all
late
those.
80s prime
Yeah.
time lineup.
Yeah. Um, so, and it was a great experience, but I interviewed like 25 people, and it's all mixed together as an oral history is, and it was a lot to do. And I think David Bushman really wanted me to do an oral history from Firewalk with Me, and I just didn't want to. And there is one chapter where I sort of do that. There's a chapter where I put together all the interviews I've ever done, and so you get that, so you get to hear from all the
Hmm.
people you want to hear from. And then I like, it's chapter 3 because I'm sort of like, there you go, you
Yeah.
heard from them, now we're going to move on and we're really going to get into this.
How did you decide to structure the book? Because again, there's so many different approaches to juggle that. I thought it wisely opens with the personal voice, which again reminded me, not just your podcast, but your film. Like, it comes right through that sort of sensibility. And then you go into more talking about the big picture of the movie, different aspects, deleted scenes, all that. And then I think you kind of move into the craft aspect where you're talking to different people. The last part I read was with Ron Garcia, an interview with him, the cinematographer, who is really he does great interviews. And I mean, you did a great interview with him, but he's a great subject. I've heard him a couple times on podcasts and stuff, and he's able to kind of balance the really technical information with the emotional core of it as well, in a way I find intriguing. But so you've got those different sections of the book. Did you struggle with what order to put them in, or did it kind of flow that way naturally?
I didn't struggle too much. I think one of the major changes was Greg Feinberg. That was the
Yes.
last interview I
Okay.
did for the book. And
And he's the
that,
producer of Twin Peaks and Firewalk with Me.
correct.
Gotcha.
And his interview I loved it so much. I don't know how you felt, but I never heard anything he said before. I was just blown away by everything he said.
Yes, I had that same impression. It was very fresh, talking about the sort of process of transition between Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me. I thought was particularly striking that he was actually one of the people pushing for like, let's make a movie, and Lynch was like, yes, but we're going to go back. We're not going to go forward. So just hearing the kind of he's somebody, I'll tell you, I don't know if you have more interviews with him in you or what, but he's somebody I would love to hear about the collaboration between Lynch and Frost from, because I feel like a lot of that stuff gets sort of vague in the translation or whatever, and he seems like somebody who could make it more down to earth. Like, here's where this thing happened, here's where that thing happened. I don't know. I thought he brought a unique perspective to it.
Well, the thing that I think about him, and I coined this phrase and I absolutely love it. And maybe it'll mean something to you and maybe it won't. But I would describe him as not being Sabrina-fied.
That's very interesting, and I think I know exactly what you mean by it, but let me hear what your interpretation is, and I'll see if that's correct.
And the thing was, he held nothing back
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
interview.
okay.
He wasn't worried about Sabrina. He wasn't worried about David. He wasn't worried about Mark. I mean, to be fair, Greg Feinberg is bigger than all of them. I mean, he is a true Hollywood producer. No disrespect to David Lynch. David Lynch is David Lynch, but Greg Feinberg is doing big, huge, successful, multi-million dollar money-making shows.
Mm.
He doesn't care. You know what I mean? He wasn't even thinking about that. Like, it wasn't like I had to prep him, like, oh, do you mind if I ask you this question? I promise I'm not going to ask you about, like, he just, what do you want to ask me? And I'll tell you what I remember. And it was just so fresh because this movie is 30 years old. Honest to goodness, what are you trying to keep? We're not going to break some new story here. We're just, at least with me, I'm just trying to get the facts of how this piece of art was created. And he was very open. Now, as far as having more interviews in him, I think I got everything he has. He really doesn't remember a lot.
Fair
I
enough.
mean, a lot of questions I asked him, he would say, oh man, that was 30 years ago. So there were things that we had to, I mean, I don't know how much it comes out in the first 7 chapters, but one of the things that I try to chase in this book is the angel. Interestingly, the angel, which becomes obviously the whole end of the movie and a major part throughout the script, is never mentioned in the script. Never. There's never, ever. So you think of every line in Fire Walk with Me where they say the angel and the missing pieces, that is never written anywhere. So everyone that I talked to, I tried to talk about the angel. Well, Greg Feinberg didn't remember there was an angel in the film. So he was no help.
Yeah.
But I think he does talk a little bit about Mark and David, and I thought it was interesting what he said because he was very open about it. And again, like, I love David Lynch. I really, really, really love Mark Frost. I'm not out to hurt either of them. I just want the truth, just like you said, like, how did this relationship work? And I do think we get a little piece of it in that interview.
Mm. Um, as far as the stuff that I didn't get to read yet, and I should mention one more thing that we haven't touched on yet, the music chapter, which was great, breaking down. And I followed your advice. As I read about each track or song, I played it
I
alongside.
love
So
that you did
it
that.
worked quite well. It was a
I
good
love that
step.
you did that. I do put that in as a note to the reader that I think it helps. I mean, when I wrote that chapter, I had the music playing
Yeah.
on repeat on whatever I was doing. And, you know, I'm trying to be very zen about this, but I got a yes from Angelo to take part in the book. And Angelo is my dream interview of my life. I mean, if I could interview anyone on the planet, it would be Angelo. And he said yes, and he asked for a list of questions. And I spent days coming up with the greatest 20 questions in the history of the world. And they were, you know, just deep dive, great questions. And I sent it to him, and then he said he didn't think he could do the interview. And I was sort of disappointed. So I went off and wrote the chapter. And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to send it to him and see if that helps. So I sent him the chapter. And I said, could you at least fact check this for me? Because I break down the songs and I wanted to be sure I was correct. And he did send me a very nice email and gave me a blurb for the book that's on the back cover that said that no one has ever understood his music as well as me.
That's a
And
pretty good one.
I just, that meant so much to me. So I've tried to say, look, I didn't get my interview, but I wrote something that Angelo approved of and it made him feel good. And isn't that better than getting something? No, it isn't. I want the damn interview. I didn't mean that. Excuse me. No, I'm happy I got the thing. But it really did mean a lot to me because the music is my favorite part of all of Twin Peaks.
Did you have the tracks that you discuss, I think, see if I can do this from memory. Birds in Hell, Moving Through Time, Voice of Love, Half Heart, Pink Room, and the main theme, and the main Fire Walk With Me theme. And was there another one or two in there?
There's Blue Frank with
Blue
the
Frank,
Pink
right,
Room.
with the Pink Room. Yeah.
I think that might be it. You did better than me. I don't
There
think I
you
could
go.
have done that. I think you should.
Playing the music made it a trigger. So now I can just recall. But did you have other tracks that you considered and eliminated for space? I mean, besides the other 40, but
right. I mean, the truth was that I didn't even really think that much on what I picked. Like, I mean, I kind of wanted to do Sycamore Trees, of course, but I didn't.
yeah,
And
that's more
I
of
kind of wanted to do
it's on the soundtrack.
Christians in a World of Blue, but I didn't. I mean, I kind of tried to balance between what would be easy as far as someone who had seen the movie maybe only a couple times, what they would remember. I could have done any of them. I really could have, because I love all of them so much. Like I love Deer Meadow Shuffle, or I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And you know, I could sing that ba-doom, bum, bum, ba-doom, dun, dun. Like that sticks in my head forever. And so I don't know. I probably could have done more, but I think I had a page limit when I got, that was the last thing I wrote because I was really holding on for Angelo. And then I was just like, it's not going to happen. And so I think I knew how many pages it had to be. And I might have just written to the page.
Yeah, as great as the music on the show is, the film soundtrack is just, it's almost like it has another dimension. It's like the 3-dimensional version of Twin Peaks music or something like that.
It's a little more grown up. It's more complex,
Yeah.
and which was really what I wanted to get to with Angelo, because I've been lucky enough to interview a lot of the directors from the series over time. I do know that the system of how it worked is basically he just wrote songs and it was the director that kind of combed through and then put them there. So while we might think of, let's say, Attack of the Pine Weasel as that song, Angelo may not have written that as Attack of the Pine Weasel. It was just that the director put it
right. Yeah.
on the Pine Weasel and it became that. But the film, it didn't work that way, you know. So I think he's more scoring to the scenes, and obviously David doing the Pink Room and Blue Frank is creating those scenes around the songs for them, and that didn't happen in the series. So that could certainly be a part of it.
Although you did point out something that I found kind of amazing. I'd never heard it or thought of it before. Although I'd seen the series, so maybe I heard it and just didn't register. But you said that the song Half Heart, which is one of the most poignant tracks in Fire Walk With Me, feels written specifically for Laura and kind of capturing that really beautiful, tragic, wistful kind of quality. was not actually written for Firewalk with Me. It comes from On the Air, which is a totally goofy, broad slapstick show. I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, and that, and again, that was part of why I wanted Angela to fact check me, because I just wanted to be, you know what I
Which
mean?
one came first, I guess. Yeah.
Right. I mean, well, I mean, On the Air had to come first, because it did, they did it before they did Firewalk with Me, but I just wanted to be sure that that was correct. And so that was good that Angelo didn't bust me on that. But I do think that is interesting. And one of the things that I have fun with, as I say, I love to make jokes about Twin Peaks, is just how hard it is to name anything or figure anything out, because they mess everything around. And so you can call a song something, but you better be sure that's where it's from, because it could be name this over here and name something over here. So it's a very frustrating world to write about.
There was a great line you had about Laura's theme versus the Firewalk with Me theme, which I basically just wanted to repeat here. You said, talking about the theme on the show and all of the things it evokes about how the characters felt about her, about how she's absent, she's not there, but they're sort of yearning for her. And you said what it doesn't represent is the living Laura, and then talked about how Firewalk with Me does. And that I thought that whole passage on those two themes really captured the difference between the music and just the general sensibility of the show and the film. So I appreciated
Thank
that
you.
quite a bit.
Thank you. I mean, I loved that when I wrote that. And I just think it's true. Like, if you think of the Laura Palmer that we know in Firewalk with Me, and you think of Laura's theme, I mean, it doesn't really go together. But theme from Firewalk with Me, or calling it She Would Die for Love, I mean, that does. And to me, that is the genius of Angelo. I mean, he knew that. He understood his job for what his job was in scoring the pilot, which was to make us feel sad for someone that we don't know. And that song does it. Versus scoring the living, breathing Laura Palmer, which, in my opinion, the best Twin Peaks song ever written was Theme from Firewalk with Me. I just think it's so complex and has so much in it, and I could listen to it forever, and it's by far my favorite track ever. What would your favorite track ever be in the Twin Peaks world? I'm putting you on the spot. Don't you love
Yeah.
how I'm
No, I
asking you
mean,
questions?
I've thought about it. I think I've even ranked them at some point. I believe I put Harold's theme at the top. Just something about that feels like it captures just the kind of quiet, sad mystery and intrigue of the show in a way that almost no other piece does. And there's so many good versions of it too. I love the living novel version that they play on the Atmospherics Blu-ray menu when they do the montage of the town and like all the different spots. So that one has a lot of that one evokes a lot for me. I think Half Heart is also way up there too. Like it's sort of right on the edge of being almost like too uh sentimental, maybe is the word, but it's
Mhm.
just it's so purely it wears its no pun intended, wears its heart on us on its sleeve in a way that I think totally justifies it, and it's used pretty sparingly. But that's another one where like when I was making my video on Firewalk with Me, or one of the one that was the 7 facts about Twin Peaks Firewalk with Me, which was like my most viewed video and all of that. I had a different piece of music for each of the 7 facts, and the one that ended it was after talking about how Twin Peaks or Firewalk with Me subverts Twin Peaks and all these differences. I said it also fulfills Twin Peaks, and I show a juxtaposition of the scenes from the show with the scenes from the film that kind of call back to it, but almost feel more deeply rooted. Like, okay, we saw Jacques' cabin on the show as a crime scene. Now here it is with them there, with Laura on her last night. And I use that theme, Half Heart, because of that quality. The way it's like it comes, well, I guess it comes from On the Air, but it comes
Mhm.
from the film, and yet in a way, it feels like it was there before everything on the show. Like it's more fundamental. Like we're going back to the root, which is how Fire Walk with Me feels in general. I think it's a prequel in like the deepest sense of the word, where we feel like we're uncovering what was already always there. Even though it's also fascinating to look at the ways it builds out of Twin Peaks. But anyways, that's a long segue on the music, but I think it's worth it. I'll probably play a little of it, sparingly, so the YouTube gods don't get angry. But underneath the interview on there, um, yeah. So, anyways, we'll skip over some of that when I cut it down. But not the music,
Yeah, it
but
was good.
the band, the digression at the end. Um, so something else about what we were just talking about this idea of like Twin Peaks and Fire Walk with Me. I wanted to ask you, what's it like to look back on yourself when you were a Twin Peaks fan without Fire Walk with Me? Is it even possible, or did Fire Walk with Me change things so much that you can't even necessarily access
I
that part of
certainly can.
yourself anymore? Okay.
I certainly can. Um, and I think I had sort of alluded to it where, and I don't think I've ever said this in public, but I didn't like Laura Palmer. Um, and I think it's interesting, for all the times I've talked to Cheryl Lee, I've never asked her this question. I can't believe I just said for all the times I talked to Cheryl Lee. That was like really, I have not talked to her that many times. And however many times I do, it's not enough. But
Right.
like,
That's
I
why
really don't like the episode 1 flashback. I am so happy today,
it's a very
James.
Britney Spears. No,
Um,
no shade on Britney, but it's a different vibe of Laura.
yeah, I mean, and I do totally get, before people at home are screaming at me, I totally get that you are seeing that memory through James. And I understand that's how he saw her. But it just turned me off, when you've got Sherilyn Fenn playing Audrey Horne with all this power, and even Laura Flynn Boyle, Donna, who in the beginning was a very strong character as well. So I just wasn't that interested in Laura Palmer. I mean, I just wasn't. So I didn't really even care that it was going to be about her. I mean, I kind of remember having that feeling like, what are you talking about? You made my Cooper Bob. Like, I need answers and I need them now. Like, I want to know what happened. But within that 2 hours and 15 minutes, all of that changed. I mean, the Laura that Cheryl Lee brought to life, whatever, a year later, 2 years later, changed everything for me. So it changed how I felt about different characters. Moira Kelly changed how I felt about Donna. All of that stuff.
And you mentioned talking to Cheryl Lee a couple times. I've said this before on Twitter. I think the interview you did with her in Blue Rose, I thought was just fantastic. Like that was one of the best interviews I've read, certainly with her, but just Twin Peaks in general. And then I saw in this book, and this is a part that has not been revealed to me yet, but you do have another interview, and I think you said it's like a whole separate interview, right? Like this is a whole new one just on Firewalk with Me, or is there
Correct.
overlap with the earlier
There is
one?
no overlap at
Ah,
all. And in fact, it is interesting because someone said, like, are you using your interview from issue 8 in the book? And I said, no. And they were like, that's such a good
I
interview.
know.
But I'm like, that's in issue 8. In fact, I wanted to have nothing that was ever anywhere. And that's where I sort of compromised, and I do a chapter called One of Their Meetings. And that's, so you kind of get it. And there you
Mm,
go. There's Ray Wise, there's Lenny Von Dolan, and all these people that you kind of want to hear from. But I feel like if you're a Blue Rose subscriber or you've gotten our books, that is all stuff that's out there. I mean, it's good to compile it, and it's fun to read it all in a row. But I that interview with Cheryl is the highlight of my life. It happened on February 24th, 2018. It happened on February 24th. That is the day I met Sheryl Lee. Is that not insane? I met her on Twin Peaks Day.
Yeah, that is wild.
And, I'm man enough to say that, like, during the interview, I cried twice. She cried. Courtney cried. I mean, it was a very emotional, and it wasn't even like crying, like, oh my God, I'm meeting Laura Palmer. It was like our conversation was moving us all to tears because we were discussing things that mattered. And when I went back, I re-listened to the interview. I didn't read what's in the Blue Rose. I thought, I'm going to listen to this. And I, as much as I love it, and I do love it, it wouldn't have fit at all in the book.
And the part that I
And
remember most distinctly is about season 3. You know, the stuff that stuck out to me the most was her talking about and you being honest about how part 18 felt, which I think is going to be a big part of our latter part of this conversation. So we'll save that. But I do remember it being more focused on that in some
yeah,
ways. So it makes
um,
sense you'd need to go back to that well in a way.
so I mean, Sheryl was super kind to be willing to give me a new interview, and so it's totally brand new, and it ends the book. The final chapter is called "It's Just Sheryl Lee Now," and
Mm.
when I thought of that, I was super excited, and it's a good ending. Like it's the way to end because the book is rolling to that. Is getting to hear from Sheryl. And like you read the Ron Garcia interview, which I think
Mhm.
is worth the price of this book just there. But him talking about Sheryl Lee just was so moving. I mean, to me, like to hear him feel about Sheryl how I feel about her, because he was right there watching her go through this. And to me, it's just incredible what Sheryl Lee gave to all of us to live forever. To access pain like that is something that I don't know. It's crazy to me that she did that.
What can you tell us about that interview in a way to not to give anything away, but sort of pique our interest? What was what did you take from it in a way, in the broad sense that we can look forward to when we get a chance to read it?
Um, it's funny because what I think about it more than anything else, and the only person that's read it is David Bushman. He's editing the book, and we just talked today because we just finished. The book is finally, I think, edited and perfected and stuff. And he actually disagreed with me, so maybe I'm not the right person to tease it, but I feel like she really busted my chops throughout the interview. And it's not to say it's a contentious interview, because I realize that everyone is super sensitive now, and any kind of disagreement is seen as bad. But in a way, I take it as the best compliment in the world, because I think in some ways Sheryl was comfortable enough with me that she argues with me quite a bit. And I loved it. And it's the same with Mary Sweeney.
Oh, yeah.
Mary Sweeney also just busts my balls in that interview. I mean, and I love that. I mean, that to me is why I want to do that. I don't want to do an interview where I say, like as an example with Mary Sweeney, I say Sheryl Lee gives the best performance ever captured on film, because I believe that. And Mary Sweeney says, do you know how many performances there are on film? You can't say it's the best one. And like, how fun is that? You know what I mean? Like, she could just ignore what I just said and go on. But she didn't. She's like, cut it out. It's not the best ever. And what is the best ever? And we ended up having this like little debate. And I love that. And Cheryl does the same thing to me. And to me, as an interviewer, I don't mind being wrong. Like, let's have that discussion. And I don't edit. And that's what I talked to David Bushman about today. I said, I don't edit it out. I don't change my question so I look smart or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, this is our conversation, and Cheryl Lee thinks I'm wrong about a lot of things. And Mary Sweeney thinks I'm wrong. And maybe the readers will too. And I don't care. I mean, it's Twin Peaks. We're all right and we're all wrong.
Yeah, the Mary Sweeney interview, I think, even more than the Cheryl Lee one, is what I'm most anticipating about this book, just because I feel like she has such a unique vantage point on not just Firewalk with Me, but that period of Lynch's work and that collaboration they had, which to me is probably, it's arguably the most important, and it is inarguably the most overlooked collaboration of Lynch. It's just
Well,
crazy to think that what a kind of I'll put it this way. I don't want to overstate it, but I can't think of another person he's worked with who you can take their first work together and their last and kind of bracket it off, and it is as distinct an era in his work as anything you could imagine. Like, to me, they're the Sweeney years, and that's my favorite Lynch, to be honest, by
well,
quite a bit.
you had mentioned that we're gonna circle back around, I assume, when we make these suckers pay to listen to us talk.
I'm wondering now. I think I'm going to rearrange a lot of this because I want to put all the book stuff up front, but there's so much other stuff too to dig into that I might.
But I'm going to
push.
tease the pay people. I'm going to
Okay,
help.
okay, go for it.
Maybe
Maybe
I'm
we'll
going
leave
to
this.
say,
Maybe I'll follow your lead, as you just said with those interviews, and just let it all flow.
and I'm just saying that later, if you seem like you're going to ask me about part 18, and we're going to make
Oh,
people
yeah.
pay for that, I'm going to come back to the exact thing what you just said, and I'm going to say something extremely what's conversational? No, that's controversial.
Mm.
I'm going to say something controversial that's in response to what you just said, but I'm not going to say it now because
We'll save
these
it.
deadbeats,
We'll save it. There we go.
these deadbeats listen to it for free.
Got to buy the book and pay for the podcast.
Yeah, they better buy the book. But let me tell you can I tell you my Mary Sweeney story?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, here is my Mary Sweeney story. On the day I die, I will still remember my time with Mary Sweeney. It is going to be burnt into my brain for life, and that is not an exaggeration. Again, I got teared up in that interview. I wouldn't say that, she certainly did not get teared up, but talking to her mattered so much to me that I really did get emotional towards the end. And I mean, I think it's the third best interview I ever did. And I know that doesn't sound that impressive, but I've done a lot of interviews, like maybe 200 or 300 with my books. And so to be in the top 3 is something. So she was really rough at first. I mean, those first 10 minutes on the phone, I wouldn't say it was great. I mean, I had some work to do. And she really does bust me out. Like, a lot of times she just does not take what I'm selling. And I love that. Again, I mean, she's very strong-willed. But then I would say after 10 minutes, we start going. It's good. We get some good stuff. And I was watching the clock. She said she had a hard out. I only had 60 minutes with her, and we blew the first 10. I mean, we didn't blow it, but
Yeah. Warm up.
Yeah, we weren't, she was giving me Sabrina-fied answers. And by the way, I love Sabrina Sutherland. That's not a cut on Sabrina Sutherland at
She
all.
does her
She's
job very, very well. Put it
and
that
no
way.
one, not a single person in the entire Twin Peaks cast and crew has supported me more than Sabrina. Sabrina has never asked me for a free copy of a book, a magazine, and she's bought every single thing we've put out. She might be the only person who owns every copy of the Blue Rose magazine, but she does. I mean, and she's never asked for free, even when we've interviewed her, which we always send someone a free copy. So I honestly respect and love Sabrina. So no one should think I'm making fun. I'm just making fun of how they're not allowed to talk. But anyway, I would say half hour in, she's starting to talk to me, and this is getting good. And now we're rolling into the things I really wanted to get to. And I think she makes me cry at like 50 minutes in. And now I know my time's ticking, and I got to be respectful because I'm a professional. I'm not gonna, she said she had a heart out. I'm letting her go at 59, no matter where we are. And I'm telling you, those last 6 minutes, she was sharing her heart. And for my entire life, I will wish that I had 10 more minutes with her. If I could have just had 10 minutes, I could have gotten anything I ever wanted from Mary Sweeney. I think she would have told me whatever I wanted to know. And it just killed me. I had to let her go because we were such on the cusp of having the real discussion I wanted to have. And we have it a little bit, but we don't really get in there. And she was sharing, and then it was gone, and she doesn't answer my emails. And I'm not saying she's mad at me, but like she asked to approve the interview. I sent it to her. She's never responded. I've asked her a follow-up question. She's not responded. I mean, she's done talking to me.
Mhm.
It was just like she came, I got the interview, she's gone. And I'm just like, oh, if I had that 10 minutes, what could I have learned?
Well, we're going to use that as a bit of a segue to start gearing toward the second half of this conversation. But before we do that, I want to give you an opportunity to just tell everyone the many places they can find you and find your work. I mean, I mentioned at the outset, podcaster, musician, some filmmaker, but I didn't mention author, which you're an extremely prolific author. You've written a series of short fiction, I believe, and all of these books on TV history. So tell us about that, and then the best place to kind of pursue that stuff.
So here's what I really need. This is why I'm here.
Yes, let's start with that. Fair enough.
Here's what I need. I need you who are out there listening to go pre-order Firewalk with Me, Your Laura Disappeared from bluerosemag.com. That's bluerosemag.com. Or you can go to FayettevilleMafiaPress.com. They're both me, so it actually doesn't matter. Bluerosemag.com is easier. And here's why you need to do this, because I'm doing something absolutely crazy for this book because I'm a nut. So this book is beautiful. I have full page, full color pictures. But we live in a time where corporations don't care about that. And I have a distributor because I don't self-publish. David Bushman and I are really running a company, and we have the largest distributor in America distributing our book for independent publishers, IPG. They don't really care about color books, and they don't care about paper. They think that's stupid. My Moonlighting book is beautiful, but it's expensive as hell to print. And they said, why are you doing this? You need to do print on demand. Like, no one cares. Lower your price, and this is a waste of your money. All publishers do print on demand, and no one cares what they look like. And that makes me sad to my very heart. And I'm like, I love my Firewalk with Me book. So I am going to do a print run out of my pocket and David Bushman's, sucker. We're going to do a color print run. And you're only going to get those books by buying it from me. If you buy this book on Amazon, it's going to be black and white and it's going to be print on demand. If you buy it at a bookstore, it's going to be black and white and it's going to be print on demand. It's going to be the same cost. So yeah, you can get it in May when it comes out and it'll be the same text, but it's not going to be on the premium paper in full color. And how many I pre-order is how many I can buy. And it's just because I want a color copy on my shelf. So it's up to you. Do you want a crappy book because that's what America makes right now? By all means, you can get it. Amazon will print it for you. It's going to come there and you can give Jeff Bezos your money, or you can help a little Twin Peaks guy who's trying to create something beautiful. So there's my pitch. It's $22.99 no matter what. Now I'm going to place this order, I think the first or second week of January. Right now, you're helping me when I bring that money. Once I place the order, if I get 500 books or 750 books or 1,000 books, that depends on how much money we bring in. Then, oh, that book's going to cost you. I will raise the price from $22.99 to $50 for the color copies because now they're limited edition and that's all they'll ever be. So there's my pitch. You can, for the same price, get something beautiful on quality paper, or you can was it too hard? Was I too bitter?
No, that was good. But
because it's just the truth.
To be clear about the timeline, what is the timeline they have to pre-order and get that color book for $22 or 20, or
it's $22.99.
$22.99 before the cutoff, after which it will become,
well, that's when we go to print, which I can't tell you when that's going to be because everything is so slow. I sent away for the quote. I'm trying to figure out if we can afford it and what we can do. My guess is the second week of January. So you've got,
so the sooner the better that you pre-order.
Yeah, because it lets us know, whatever. And it's what we did with the art issue just recently. And now we only have 50 copies left and then they're gone forever because we can only print, because I'm really printing these out of the money and it's super expensive to do it in color on good paper, but I want it to be beautiful because Fire Walk with Me matters to me. And they're going to be collectors and then people are going to be pissed because they went to Amazon and they're like, mine's black and white. What do you mean? And I mean, it's still going to be good. It's going to be the same book, but don't you want something that, pops? And the reason I'm doing that, it's all because of the Ron Garcia interview, because I sent him pictures and he goes through and talks about the lights and the lighting. And at that point, I thought the book was going to be black and white because basically that's what we're being told we really have to do to stay in their price range. And I was like, it's not going to be as good because you need to see he's talking about how he's shooting a blue light across Sheryl Lee's face. And you're not going to see that in black and white. And that's when I was like, this book has to be in color. So this is sort of my plan. So I'm going to print early. I'm going to get those books in March. You're going to get the book in March, but the book doesn't come out till May 25th because I got to get all those out of the warehouse to trick IPG. They don't listen to your podcast, so they won't know. And then fill them with black and white books. So it's really ridiculous what I'm doing. And I'm only doing this because I own the company and I can do it. So that is my crazy pitch that I'm just being honest and open about, that, we're just a little business. We're trying to stay. Every time someone orders from the Blue Rose, it truly matters and it lets us create another piece of Twin Peaks art. Whew.
There you go. Okay. We'll have all that. The link will be on the screen and the show notes and everything. So let's pivot a little bit now toward what you talked about before with part 18 and kind of use that as an entrance to the second half. So Scott, what are your controversial thoughts on the last piece of Twin Peaks that we may ever see? And after all those teasers, we're going to stop there for the YouTube audience, but I definitely encourage you to consider becoming a patron to Lost in the Movies on patreon.com/Lost in the Movies. For $5 a month, you get access to full Twin Peaks conversations, and then $1 a month, you get access to the main episode. But for those who want to hear the rest of this one, the rest of the conversations I've been having since September and we'll be having throughout 2022, that's a great value for you there. So check it out. And that's it for today. We'll see you back here next month. There's a few potential guests for January that I'm considering. And we'll work out the schedules and see who it's going to be. They all have great things to discuss, so I'm looking forward to that.